everybody at the end of the day wants to feel like a VIP. And I think
Yeah.
that's actually a great guiding principle for hotels or any service provider that's looking to kind of up their game. So that's like one grouping. I think another one is just related to details. So like really sweat the small stuff. If you as a service provider can signal that you care and about the details, it just elevates the entire experience.
Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We're here and we're live, so you're on.
Okay.
I always love whenever I have someone on the show that's not just in hospitality. Although I don't think you might not consider yourself this, but you're in hospitality.
It's funny. I honestly haven't thought a ton about it, but we absolutely are.
Yeah. We're going to talk about it today, but you're obviously for everybody listening or watching, because we'll watch this as well. That's why I wore this. You are the co-founder. And what's your title other than co-founder at BoomPop?
Chief Product and Design Officer.
Chief Product Officer. Which is what we're going to dig into a bunch today. Chief Product and Design Officer and co-founder at BoomPop. So we're going to talk a bunch about BoomPop today. Also, selfishly about how it relates to restaurants. But can we talk about like how we met? Because I don't think I'd talk about Hampton much, but it's a pretty dope program that I unfortunately, I'm still part of, but need to reinvigorate. But what's your thoughts on not just Hampton, the community, but like the group and all that? Because that's how we met. To wind everybody up, we're part of this group, or have been part of, called Hampton, which is a group of CEOs, and we have a small group, and then that everybody meets once a month, and then a large group of lots of CEOs that sort of interact in the Slack channel, and it's pretty cool. But what's your thoughts on that sort of? I don't even know what you call that. What do you call that? Like
Founders community.
Yeah, founder community. What's your thoughts on it? How do you feel it's going?
Overall, it's been amazing. I think I've been with Hampton for 2.5 years. I was one of the first members to join. I think if you think about kind of support groups, every type of person generally has some sort of support group. Founders kind of don't. Like, it's lonely being at the top. And I think that the best part about being in Hampton for me has been just any question that I need answered, generally somebody in our group has experienced. And so I can go to them and say, hey, I'm struggling with this thing. And usually someone says, yeah, I experienced that last year. Here's what I would do, or here's what I did in the past, or here's what I learned. So that's been amazing. I wish I had more time to actively engage with the group. Now they're doing kind of more in-person activities, which is awesome. When we started, it was purely virtual.
Yeah.
And they're really leaning into like monthly activities in each city, which is cool. But yeah, it's been great. And obviously we never would have met. So I'm extremely grateful that they connected us. And, now I have lifelong friends because of it.
It is crazy, right? Like it would be very unlikely that we would have met or become friends or interacted the way that we did then if that community didn't exist. So just for that, I think it's pretty incredible.
It's a good forcing function, right? Because like, I don't know about you, but when you're a founder, like you're just go all the time, heads down work. If you're not working, you're usually family. And so making new friends and extending your network isn't as easy as you being in your mid-20s or in college or something. And so it's been a great outlet just to meet other amazing people and make friends with them.
Yeah. And I mean, as you get older, just generally speaking, I think it's harder to make friends, at least evergreen friends. And then, there are just things that it's just hard to talk to everyone else about,
Totally.
So anyways, I'm grateful for the community and obviously just stoked that you and I have become friends. I think it'll be helpful to talk a little bit about your background because I wanted to talk today, if it's cool with you. Obviously, we're going to talk about BoomPop. I love it. Obviously, transparently, like I invested, but also I just love it. And we're customers at Me's. But your background's pretty amazing because there's so much sort of design and branding and architecture, all those kinds of things that play into what you do and how that sort of helps you build this incredible business.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to talk to you about design thinking. We didn't really talk about that, but I think I may have put it in some notes or something.
We talked about it.
Yeah, just the approach to design thinking and branding, things like that. But can you share a little bit about at a high level, kind of your background professionally, and then maybe even like personally as well, if you can, because I know some, but not
Yeah, totally. When I was growing up, all I wanted to be was an architect. And so I went through more schooling than I like to admit, 8 years total, kind of undergrad and grad school, and came out of school, worked as an architect for 3 years. I kind of climbed the corporate ladder pretty fast. I ended up at one of the top firms really quickly in my career, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. They did like the New World Trade Center, the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. It's like the place to go, if you're working in architecture. And I wasn't happy. I was actually very unhappy at that time. This is around kind of like the 2012 time in San Francisco. I was looking around, and all of my friends, they were kind of like building the next thing. They were, early employees at Airbnb and Uber and all these, companies that are really well known now. They weren't back then. And they were kind of building the future. And I was like, that's much more aligned with my ambitions. I think it's hard to be really ambitious in architecture because it takes a career to really be successful. And folks who've done it for a long time feel like they're kind of holders of the fire. They don't necessarily want to give that up to some kind of whiz kid who wants to take the shortcut to get there. And so I left architecture, which was a really big deal. And a lot of people were like, "What are you doing?" And I left it to go into this kind of up and coming field we now call product design. Back then it was kind of UX design. And it was the best decision for me. It was able to move a lot faster. Experimentation is really valued, not so much in architecture where everything is revolved around code and tight budgets. And so I jumped in right away, and I really started to thrive. And so I worked at a bunch of different design agencies that consulted for companies all over the world. And then I eventually ended up at a small R&D team at Google called Google ATAP. And I worked on this really amazing platform. It was one of at the time, the world's largest smart garment platform. The whole idea was to take this conductive thread that was invented within Google ATAP and embed it into garments. And our first collaboration was with Levi's, and we took one of their old school trucker jackets, which I think has been around for 70 years, and we embedded our conductive thread into the left cuff. And you could do things like swipe in, swipe out, double tap, long hold, and that would connect to your phone. And so imagine you're going for a walk or on a bike ride, and you want to like accept a call without taking your phone out, or play the music, or turn up the volume. The whole concept was connected, not distracted. And it was this response to how we have just become slaves to our phones. We're always looking at our phones. It's unhealthy for a lot of ways, but people still want to be connected to technology. They don't want to completely disconnect. And so this was this kind of bridge between the two things. So that was amazing. It was honestly my dream job.
Why is that not in our clothes today?
Yeah. So how much time do we have?
I mean, you can give the fast version if you want, but like that seems brilliant. Why didn't that catch on?
So the short answer is that I think last year Google shut down the entire Google ATAP division, which was a bunch of their R&D. It was kind of like all of their emerging technologies around consumer electronics, and Jacquard was a part of that. So I have hope that it's going to come back at some point. Who knows when? A lot of people don't realize this, but Jacquard was in academia for like a decade before it even started, working on a kind of a commercial piece of it. And we were going back and forth of like, do we launch this as a dedicated product, or do we create more of a platform that other brands can build off of? And what we ended up doing is we opted into the latter. And so we partnered with Levi's, with YSL, with Adidas, and a bunch of well-known companies that are experts at building their own apparel. And then we just were the kind of the technology piece, because we didn't claim to be fashion designers ourselves. And so that was kind of like the whole premise, is we just create a platform that other big brands can build off of. And look, like, emerging technology adoption is just really hard. It can take decades to get off the ground, especially if it's not like embedded in your phone. And so Google wasn't making money off of it right away. And, as the economy kind of got tough the last few years, it was one of the, generally R&D is one of the first thing that big companies cut. And so this was a part of that.
Yeah. Going back to the architects for a second, I am curious. You said that there's sort of this hierarchy, and you have to be in it for a very long time. Is that just because of like socially, or just the social construct of architecture? Like, could you Be brilliant and work your ass off, and in 2 years be the greatest architect, on the planet? Or is it just a matter of you have to do it for a really long period of time and learn every possible, technique and code and things to be a good architect?
I think actually both can be true. I think there are examples of folks who have ascended, to be really well-known architects very fast in their career. Look up Bjarke Ingels. His firm is big. Bjarke Ingels Group. He's kind of like the poster child for like starting his own firm right out of college and then becoming he's one of the best architects in the world now. That is very rare, extremely rare. One, because there is an element of expertise that you have to just gain by many, many years of practicing. There's just like the technical piece. And that can be true in engineering and, in the sciences and in a bunch of different areas. So architecture is not an exception. I think what Bjarke did is he just surrounded himself with other, super experienced people who really understood the technical piece. And he was brilliant at storytelling and kind of concept design. And so that's generally what I've seen, especially for younger folks, is they don't lean on necessarily the technical aspects as their zone of expertise. They come in as the ideas person. And Bjarke is also an amazing marketer. And so he can get clients, sold on his vision and then assemble the team that he needs to actually execute on it. But it's very, very rare. Most people spend 20, 30 years getting to a point where they can run their own firm.
Yeah, yeah, it's so fun. I think about it in the chef world, and there are examples of that. Someone that has not a ton of experience, but innately understand something and become incredible chefs early on. But primarily, it takes a long time. You have to really perfect techniques and spend a lot of time doing, the same thing to really get a feel for it. There's definitely a parallel there. BoomPop. Let's talk about it, and then we're
Yeah.
going into some design stuff. So, by the way, I love BoomPop, so I will give my kind of version of what I think it is, but it sounds like it's actually evolving a bunch, and it sounds like also you're putting a bunch more technology in it. So I'm super excited to hear more about that. But for me, BoomPop, it basically like takes all of the work of creating, planning, and organizing an event internally in your company, and takes all that work off your plate and gives it to BoomPop, and then you handle all that by way of people and technology to make sure that you have this incredible experience, whether you're going to a resort or hotel or a restaurant or anything that you're doing in this event, to make sure that it's awesome. But maybe like for you could, if that's wrong or if you think it's differently, like explain it. And then I'd love to. I don't know if we actually talked about this. I know there was a bit of a pivot, but like why you started BoomPop,
Yeah.
and why you think it needs to exist.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, you nailed it. So good job. I think kind of the one liner that I use to describe BoomPop is it's a next gen platform to manage complex events and logistics of travel. The origin story is back in 2020. 5 years ago, we started it. It was a few months into the pandemic. Great time to start an events company, by the way. We spent the first 2.5 years building out one of the world's largest virtual events marketplaces, which basically connected companies that wanted to do events virtually with hosts who were amazing, in some vertical. It was like celebrity chefs, it was sommeliers, stand-up comedians, magicians. And we said this amazing network of these folks who would come in and kind of service these virtual events. And then we just, we made it easy for both sides of the marketplace to transact. So we did that during COVID. We raised some money around it. We're doing really well. You probably did some of these virtual events yourself. I'm guessing at Mies. Was Mies around back then?
Sort of. We launched like 2021 to the public, and we were in 2020 we were building. So
yeah, okay. And so as the pandemic was waning and the world was kind of starting to open up again, we started interviewing our customers, and we asked them, said, "Hey, are you planning to continue doing virtual events?" And a lot of them said no. And a lot of them said, "Hey, we're gonna stay fully remote as a team, but we want to really get back together in person again." And by the way, at that time, we were doing the same thing ourselves. We've always been a fully remote team at BoomPop, but we started getting together in person every quarter. We'd fly everybody into to a fun destination, and for the whole week, we'd work together intensely. We'd play together. We'd stay in the same hotel. We'd have meals together. And we'd all leave that just with our cups full, just like energized. And then we all go back home, to our home cities. And then we do it again and again. So every quarter, that's kind of become our cadence of these in-person offsites. And what we realized in doing this was one, it was amazing. Everybody loved it. Everyone was happy. Everyone loved this kind of like hybrid work environment. But two is it was a logistical nightmare. And we kept asking ourselves, like, why is there not an easier way to do this? And we got to a point where we just said, screw it. Like, let's just build this ourselves because we're not seeing a solution out there. And so it was kind of a combination of hearing from customers that they didn't want to do virtual events. We could see the writing on the wall of demand diminishing. And then seeing this other kind of new opportunity of mainly offsites and retreats that kind of existed pre-COVID, but not to the level that it does today. And then realizing, oh, wow, in-person events is a massive industry. Like, do you know how much spend in the US happens within corporate travel each year?
I mean, in the billions, I'm sure. I don't know.
It's over $1 trillion.
Whoa, really?
It's over $1 trillion.
Wow, that's crazy. That's, do you know how much revenue restaurants generate in the US?
Count.
About $1 trillion.
Whoa. Okay, that's also crazy.
So it's crazy that it's the same. I would have expected restaurants have a lot more revenue than events. That's pretty crazy. Although
Yeah.
I guess a lot of that event spend might go to restaurants and hotels.
Yeah. So anyways, it was about halfway through the history of the company. It was about 2.5 years ago. We ended up doing a significant pivot away from virtual events into building this in-person events platform. And look, like, if you've had to plan an event for over 10 people, you know how hard it is. It is absolute chaos. You're working across spreadsheets, Notion docs, different calendar tools, communication tools. You can send invites out. There's like a tool for everything. And you could easily touch 15 or 20 disparate software tools to make an event happen. And so what we've done is we've stitched together all of those things into basically a one-stop shop platform where it can do everything for you. So sourcing vendors, signing contracts, collecting payments, booking transportation, building agendas, getting out of email so you can do messaging straight in our platform. I think what's unique about BoomPop is we have this one-stop shop software platform where you can kind of do everything on your own, but we also have a full-service event planning agency, which is really rare to have both of those things. So a lot of companies out there, it's kind of either or. It's like very specific software for event planning or an events agency that kind of just uses off-the-shelf tools. And we're truly one of the only companies that has both. We have a full-time team of over 30 event planners. Again, most services companies will use contractors. We went all full-time because it's the only way that we can like really manage quality, and retention is so important for us. We need to make sure that everyone has a really, really amazing experience. And I think what is most exciting to me about working in this space is that it's still really archaic, actually. Like, a lot of this industry is run on phone calls, back and forth, emails. It hasn't been touched like a lot of industries that I think we're kind of used to. And some of the tools that I think you and I are used to using every day is like mind blowing in the events industry, right? One example, we launched this a few months ago. You might have even used it for your recent event. Is on BoomPop, when guests RSVP and they confirm their attendance to an upcoming event, and they opt into text messages, they automatically get a text from BoomPop AI, and it'll greet you by name. It'll say, "Hey Josh, thanks so much for confirming your attendance. You can text this number anytime with any questions that you have about the event, and the AI will respond in real time." So you can ask things like, "What's the weather going to be at my event next week? Can you give me a packing list? What should I pack? What are fun things to do in the area around my hotel during my downtime? Should I take an Uber from the airport, or is there going to be a shuttle that's arranged? What time's Blake's flight landing?" It knows everything about the event. It's the first of its kind, to our knowledge. I don't think anything like this exists in the world. And so we launched this, and the reception's been amazing. People are like, this is a really cool thing. And so our intention is to continue building a bunch of these tools and really bring the events industry kind of like into the 21st century like it deserves.
So cool, man. And it makes total sense. All the information is there, and why? Well, you don't even need spreadsheets. Just query it. I don't know if we actually played around with that. I think Maria may have, but clearly, like, you're planning the entirety of the event, right? So there's travel, right, and then there's the place you're going to stay, there's the place you're going to eat, there's all the things that you're doing along the way. And again, I'm kind of leading this because I want to sort of anchor this on, you have a lot of restaurants and hotel folks that listen to the show. I have to imagine you get a bunch of feedback on what's working, what's not working. And, whether that's from the guests or from the restaurants or from the hotels, are there sort of common threads that you see that make an event incredible, or things that are like that whenever you see it, that something's going to go wrong?
So we definitely don't have all the secrets, but we've, I think, collectively over the last few years, we've planned like literally thousands of events as a company. And so I think there's a few things that I can think of that have just like have worked really well. I think one of the first things is like the importance of adding personal touches and really trying to make guests or attendees feel like VIPs. I think people remember how they feel how they felt at a given event. That's the one thing that they remember, and so it just starts with making sure that guests feel valued and seen when they're there. And there's a lot of ways to do that, right? It could be custom branded graphics when you arrive or on the menu, and when it has your company brand name or logo or typography. It's like, oh, that's a nice little touch. Even again, it sounds small, like curated music that matches the group or the vibe of the event. Welcome gifts waiting for people either in their hotel rooms or if it's an event at a restaurant. That's a really fun thing. I think any surprises go a long ways. I was at a BoomPop offsite a few months ago, and when I arrived into my hotel room, there was a plate of freshly baked cookies and a handwritten note from the hotel director. It was a small gesture, but it felt incredibly personal. And I think everybody at the end of the day wants to feel like a VIP. And I think
Yeah.
that's actually a great guiding principle for hotels or any service provider that's looking to kind of up their game. So that's like one grouping. I think another one is just related to details. So like really sweat the small stuff. If you as a service provider can signal that you care and about the details, it just elevates the entire experience. It's a hard thing to scale. I don't know if you've ever read the book The Four Seasons about the founding of the Four Seasons Hotel, where he touches on the importance of this, which I love, and
Hmm.
I've read that a few times. But things like nailing dietary restrictions for guests before they arrive, so it doesn't feel like a chore when people arrive on site. Ensuring there's blankets waiting if it's chilly, and you're in an outdoor space. Ensuring guests aren't left guessing like what to do next or where they should go. This is especially important for kind of more complex programmed events. And then I think the last thing that I've seen that has worked really well is design via the five senses. And this is really close to me just as the designer. And this is where you can sort of get creative, but great hospitality is sensory, right? You know this. You've been in this industry for a long time. And I think the most memorable events that I've been to have targeted the five senses really well. So we can go through it together. So sight, right? When you walk into a room, is the lighting warm and inviting? Is the space really well designed? So you want to, take photos of it and share it with your colleagues or your family. Taste. Is the food and drink just like checked off of a list, or is it really thoughtfully curated to the group and the vibe of the event? Smell. What does the room smell like when you enter it? I really have started to pay attention to this because I think it's becoming more kind of widely used. I've noticed especially a lot of hotels are creating their own custom scents that evoke a sense of calm or luxury. And I was in Singapore a couple years ago, and this is really common there. I don't know if you've been to Singapore, but like every hotel, every commercial space feels like they have their own scent, which I loved, and something that I think is kind of overlooked oftentimes by spaces.
Hmm. Yeah.
Sound. What is there music? Is it the right volume? Does it enhance the atmosphere, or does it make it hard to talk? Right. Touch or feel. Right. Is the temperature great? If it's hot, is there shady spots outside? If it's cold, do you have blankets? Are there different zones for people who require different temperature degrees? Those are like, I think, the big ones. Again, nothing earth-shattering, but things that I've seen that have worked really well.
Yeah. It's so interesting, the parallels. It reminds me a lot of like great cooking,
Mhm.
all the little details matter. Obviously you have to make the food delicious, but like, is it the right plate that you're using? Have you thought about the silverware that goes with it? Have you thought about like, what temperature these things should be at? And have you ever read Unreasonable Hospitality?
Oh yes. So it's actually required reading for everyone in our company.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Wow, I love to hear that. How do you think about providing hospitality with your platform, right? You obviously have people, right? So you know that you're helping to facilitate that. We should talk about that as well, like how you're interfacing with restaurants and hotels to like understand what they're doing to create a special event. But like, how do you think about digital hospitality? Like you have this technology that people are interfacing with. You have this website. You have all these things that that people are interacting with that are digital. And I know you're a designer, so I'd love to hear like how you think about
Yeah.
the digital hospitality.
Yeah. So we don't think about hospitality, just as a service. We think about it also as a product principle. And I think one North Star is creating exceptional experiences across every one of our touch points that we offer, right? Whether you're interacting with a person on our team or you're just using our software platform. And as you alluded to, I'm glad you did. One of our major, I think probably the biggest influences has been the book Unreasonable Hospitality. So not only is it required reading, one of our last offsites, the whole theme of the offsite was around unreasonable hospitality. And we had everybody read it. We did like working sessions where we like dissected it and we took principles from it and we said, how can we apply this, to
Yeah,
ourselves? And so I can't even underscore enough how much influence it's had on our company.
man, that's so. Shout out to Will. That's so cool to hear like how it's sort of crossing boundaries of other industries with what he's with his book. That's I love hearing that, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And so one of the core beliefs that we really share with that book is that products are emotional touch points. And I think we have a decent amount of our customers that don't actually interact at all with our services team. It's just they come in, they use our software. And so we have to think constantly about um, how our software can actually embody some of those hospitality principles. So, for example, one of our principles is never make customers start from scratch. And there's a few ways that we do this. One is we have a whole resources section where you can come in and you can download templates. So you can download these pre-made decks. So think of icebreaker decks or team kickoffs or budgeting templates to make it super easy for you, doing or planning your next event. We have our guest website builder, which is one of our most widely used features. Every event has a guest website that it's this kind of imagine it as like this beautiful microsite where everybody views what the event is going to be and then they RSVP there. And we basically pre-build this for everybody, for all of our customers, and we automatically pull in all the information that we have
Yep.
about the customer, where people are staying, FAQs, everything you need to know. And so when you're coming in as a user, you're just polishing or editing. It's like getting you to the last 5%, so you don't have to start from scratch. Um, what else? That's like I'd say one. I think the second principle is um, make sure users always know what's next. I think uh, there's a lot of apps and platforms out there where you kind of have to like stumble around to figure out what to do. You're kind of like you're hunting and pecking and clicking on things randomly. Like, what does this do? And we really agonize over making sure that you know where you came from, what you need to do at any given moment, and what you need to do next. And again, most apps just fumble this, and we just absolutely obsess over this. Just it provides a lot of kind of like peace if you do this well from a UX perspective as a user. Um, Another one, again from Unreasonable Hospitality that we grabbed is people can feel perfection. We agonize over perfecting the user experience of our app, um, to the extent where I've mandated that my team does weekly product critiques where they record a Loom video. It's like usually like 4 or 5 minute Loom video of our team, um, like auditing our application in real time and saying, here's things that I think that we can improve. And then we share it and we have kind of open discourse about whether we agree with it. If we do, then we implement it. And so the team is constantly kind of like looking inward and using our own product and dogfooding our own product, which I think is super important. Um, we also have 4 designers, which is pretty rare for a
Yeah.
young startup. The typical ratio for a tech company is like 8 to 10 engineers per designer. Our ratio is more like 1 to 5. And I think being a designer myself, I just made sure that attention to details is in the DNA of our company and everything that we do. And hopefully you feel that when you use our product. And then I think the last one that comes to mind, again, this is straight from Unreasonable Hospitality, so huge props to Will, is it might not work is a terrible reason not to try. I don't know if you remember that from the book, but we have a culture of constantly trying new things and testing new things, and a lot of them don't work, and that's okay. But if a few do end up working, they can be huge unlocks for us as a business. And so I really push the team to just constantly be trying things and iterating. And as long as we're learning from our failures and we do better next time, in aggregate, we end up in a much better place than not having a culture of trying things.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that that design is such a big part of the DNA of your company. I remember when it was one of the first times I met you, and one of our first conversations. It was with a group, and you did a presentation on brand building. Do you remember that?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And there was obviously a bunch of design, layered into that as well. But can we rehash that for a minute, actually? Because I thought that was a pretty. It was an incredible presentation, and I think we're pretty aligned on how we think about brand. Like for me, brand is how you make somebody feel,
Mhm.
and you did a great job of like this 0 to 1 of building a brand quickly, right? Because a lot of times it takes a long time to build brand because you have to build trust to build a brand. You have to build consistency and trust. And but how do you think about brand building, especially as it relates to everything you just talked about?
Yeah.
Of how, thinking about the little things and how you make people feel.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, as you know, and as you alluded to, I've spent my entire career working as a designer and working on brand. And so when we started BoomPop from day one, building a strong brand was like not an optional thing. Like we had to do it, before we even had customers. And one question that I get asked a lot is like, how much does brand really matter for a company, especially like an early stage company, which is kind of like my zone of expertise? And my answer always is unequivocally, it matters way more than people think it does. I think the sort of conventional wisdom is to wait until you're more of an established company, you have a solid customer base, you have solid revenue to really start to invest in your brand. But at BoomPop, we agonized early on, again, before we had many customers at all, over our brand. And so we, over our visual identity, over our voice and how we talk about ourselves, over just our overall product experience. And when we started pitching companies early on, one thing that we'd often hear is, "Hey, your company looks really polished. You know what? I'll give it a shot." And I don't think we would have landed some of those customers if it wasn't for how polished our brand actually was very early. I think one thing to note though is a beautiful brand doesn't matter at all if you can't deliver a great product experience, right? I think one thing I've been thinking about a decent amount recently is how a lot of people have become kind of numb to traditional advertising and marketing. And what really builds brand loyalty today is just delivering an amazing experience that makes people's lives generally better. And if we think about some of the breakout brand success stories of the last decade or so, I think about Airbnb, I think about Figma, I think about Hims and Hers. They didn't just have fancy advertising. They took something and they made the old way of doing something feel really clunky and outdated, and they focused on delivering the very best product experience, and then they built brand credibility around that, which I love. And one thing that I love to do, I play this little game with my team sometimes where I ask them, "Hey, what does X company sell?" And I put "sell" in kind of like quotation marks. And I don't know if we did this before, but if I ask you, we can play it together. What do you think that Airbnb sells?
Um, an experience.
In some cases, yes. But if you like zoom out even more from that, I think they sell like local, right? They sell kind of like local authenticity. We'll do a few. How about Nike? What does Nike sell?
Confidence.
Yeah, I was gonna say belief.
Mm-hmm.
The belief that when you strap on these new shoes, you're gonna have the power to run faster and farther than you did without them.
Yeah.
What about Patagonia, the clothing company Patagonia? What do they sell?
Adventure.
Yeah, I was going to say like consciousness, like connection to the environment, because they take so
Mm-hmm.
much of their revenue and they put it back into the environment, and they attract a certain kind of group of people that really care about that thing. And so that's kind of my point: is all these companies that have really successful brands, they know how to create a movement, right, around what they sell, and it's not just what they have on their price tag. It's something a lot more meaningful than that. And so every company can ask themselves this question. And I've a bunch of founder friends that I talk to constantly about this. And I ask them that same question, say, hey, what do you really sell? And, for us at BoomPop, I think we sell simplicity. We make hosting complex events really simple just by providing a single platform for travel and event planning. And so if you haven't done this yet for me, Josh, you should do it. It's a really helpful exercise.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have like a slightly different perspective on brand, but it's maybe just it might just be semantics. But I always think of brand as how do I make you feel, which might be similar to how like what do we sell, and the product experience actually, in my opinion, doesn't need to be good. That is part of your brand, whether it is or not. So, for
Mhm.
example, I mean, Timu is, I mean, I've never actually bought anything from Timu, but I think it's, like really cheap product from, China. But it's very clear the brand of Timu, what it means, quick, cheap, get it right away and get it at a much lower price than something else. And that's the same thing for, Burger King versus Minetta Tavern in New York City, right? They're both selling, burgers, right? And they're both selling, very different, feelings, right? So
Mhm.
Minetta Tavern's like this feeling of old world, sort of New York City and like the elegance of like an elevated, pub. And whereas Burger King is, the feeling that you're getting is convenience, like getting
Mhm.
in, getting out, feeling like, yeah, I was able to get that in 2 minutes and it was really cheap.
Mhm.
I feel like the ability to make somebody feel something is difficult and requires you to actually know upfront what you want them to feel.
Yeah.
I think it's a problem I see often with why I always really think to cooking, right? It's like food can be delicious, but not really sort of provide any real kind of, concrete feeling if you don't have like, you know, your sort of belief behind it. Like what story are you trying to tell? And it's the same thing with, any experience.
Yeah. I think in a way we're saying the same thing,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
which is the experience is the thing that is the strongest indicator of brand today.
yeah,
Whether you go to a restaurant and you have the experience there, or it's the experience of using a specific product. And I think that that's just the nature of where we are within the world. We're in this world of where social media touches everything, and people document their experiences and they put it on social media, and that becomes synonymous with the brand of whatever they're using. Whereas before that, it was kind of like what we saw on TV on an advertisement. That was like the brand, but we didn't necessarily experience it ourselves. And I think it's shifted a lot into being experience focused for a lot of
yeah,
brands.
yeah, yeah. What is design thinking?
How much time do you have?
Let's do it.
Okay, so maybe let's define it first, and then I can kind of explain my perspective on it. If I give it the kind of the one liner definition, I think it's just a type of problem solving that emphasizes creativity, empathy, and iteration. That's it. That said, I have like a sort of a love-hate relationship with the term design thinking. To me, it's just thinking
Hmm.
because it's how designers are trained to think. And you start with a user. Who are they? What do they need? Then you generate as many ideas as possible until you land on a solution that really sinks. So I want to throw that out there. I think, buzzword or not, I'll give you kind of a peek into how we use this mindset at BoomPop, which we definitely do. I think our approach is problems first, solutions second. Problems first, solutions second, which is really important. I think a lot of companies start with some like kind of cool tool that they build, and then they try to re-engineer or kind of reverse engineer a problem that it can solve. And at BoomPop, we do the exact opposite. We obsess over truly understanding our customers' pain points, and then after we clearly define those, then we actually get into solutioning. We ourselves have kind of this like 5-step process that I think pretty closely follows what most people would consider the design thinking process. The first is empathize. So we interview our customers. We really understand what their pain points are, what they're trying to accomplish when they're doing a certain task, especially in our product. And our goal is just to see the world through their eyes. And then the second step is the kind of definition phase, where we take all of the findings from our interviews and our research from step one, and we put those into kind of actionable problem statements. So one example, or kind of related to BoomPop, could be like planning usually requires juggling dozens of different tools. People want a single platform to handle everything. So actionable problem statement, right? Then we go to the third step, which is ideation. We generate a ton of ideas without any judgment, and we encourage wild ideas. I'm a huge fan of early on. Airbnb did this thing they called the 12-star experience brainstorm. Have you ever heard about this?
Yeah, 11. But yes,
Is it 11?
I love
Okay.
it. Yeah, I love it. It's
It's a lot of stars where they just like they try
yeah,
to take it to the max. Like
yeah,
what is the most ridiculous experience that we could do? And I absolutely love that. And so
yeah,
that's the type of thinking that's kind of required at this stage. The goal is kind of like quantity, like just get ideas out there. And hopefully from quantity, you start to get a few of those nuggets that you can take forward. And then the next stage is prototyping. So for us, this is kind of our superpower, mainly because we have a really solid design team. We have 4 designers, and we can prototype really fast. So we build these quick, scrappy prototypes, usually in Figma, and we test out these core ideas. It's not polished at all, but it's enough to get quick feedback from our customers. And then the last step is basically putting those prototypes and testing in front of our actual customers. So we learn from it, and then we refine, and then repeat. And it's this kind of feedback cycle of doing that over and over again. I think most of our design work from doing this design thinking process, it never ships. It never sees the light of day. And I actually think that's a really positive thing. I think the best designers that I've worked with and the best design teams I've worked with throughout my career are just idea machines. And most customers will never see those ideas. They just kind of stay on the cutting room floor. And I think that's actually a really good metric for a successful design team is being able to just leave a lot of ideas behind and just select the best of the best to move forward with.
yeah. Do you have any tips or things that you guys do to sort of broaden the aperture of like the types of ideas? Sometimes, obviously, an idea is only as good as how well you can execute it. But that said, I do find that sometimes we have all these cognitive biases, and it forces us to get stuck in a couple different lanes where all of our ideas start to revolve around kind of the same thing, and you don't think outside the box. Are there any sort of things that you do with your team to better think outside the box or find new directions of thought when you come up with ideas?
I mean, there's a bunch of like exercises that I could share with you offline, which I'm happy to do. But I think the best thing to do is bring in people with different viewpoints. And we do this constantly within our team. I don't come from events and travel, by the way. You knew this, right? I'm a newbie to this space, and so I've had to kind of simultaneously hire and surround myself with people who have done this a lot. Our event planners, some of them have done this 20 years. And then I can also maintain my kind of beginner's mind, which I think is super important. I think some of the best companies in the world have been built by founders who didn't come from those spaces. Airbnb is a great example. Uber, DoorDash, right? None of those founders came from those spaces. And so when we do brainstorming sessions, I'll grab somebody from every team, operations, sales, engineering, events, and we're all together. And now people are thinking way different, and that just naturally leads to kind of an organic set of problem statements that emerge, and then eventual solutions.
Yeah. Are there times when you're bringing in the end user of not the people in the events, but like restaurants or hotels or other sort of activities, and like bringing them into that ideation?
Every single week.
Yeah. How does that work?
So we do at least 2 customer interviews per week. And right now we're heavily focused on our own vendors, mainly because we're building out this new part of our platform called Partner Hub, which is basically a whole portal for our vendors to log in and kind of manage their own businesses. And so I have my product team kind of reach out and schedule calls, like usually like 45-minute calls at least, with customers. And it could be like our end users on the company side, on the kind of like the demand side, or on the supply side, which is our vendors. But just getting into a habit of saying we're going to spend at least 2 hours every week talking to one of our stakeholders. It's so critical, and it becomes second nature once you start doing it and you get into the rhythm of it. Then when you stop doing it, you're like, whoa, this feels weird. Who are we talking
Yeah.
to this week?
Yeah. But who's the role that you're talking to at like restaurants? Like who's the person that usually
It'll
interact with?
be like it'll be whoever's, well, it depends. Sometimes, sometimes it'll be like the manager on the floor that's kind of like doing everything. Sometimes it'll be like the founder of the restaurant, a little bit higher level. Depends on what kind of perspective we want. It depends on, honestly, like what problem we're trying to solve, and it has changed over time. Early on, especially when we were building the partner hub, we sought out like more kind of like high level folks. So like the global sales director, at Hyatt or Rapport,
Yeah,
we brought in, and they kind of gave us the landscape of what's going to be most useful for them for their sort of like their broader view. And then once we had that understood, then we went to individual property managers at hotels and we started interviewing them. And we said, all right, now we're going to start bottom up and make sure that those things come together in a way that makes sense.
yeah. I haven't played with it a lot, but you have this new AI tool for BoomPop. But can we maybe talk for a minute about like how you're using AI yourself? I know. Obviously, you have this knowledge base for BoomPop of all the everything that's happening in your event. The customer can query it, but how are you using AI today? Like for yourself or for just productivity and things like that?
We're super excited about the positive impact that AI has had already and is going to continue having, especially in the events and travel industry. I think there's almost too many ways to use it these days. And I think that's what kind of keeps people away. They're like, oh, I don't even know where to start. And so just given the limited bandwidth our engineering teams has to build these tools, we have to be really thoughtful about where we spend our time on building AI tools. One thing I'm 100% sure of is that companies that don't actively try to utilize AI in some way are going to get absolutely steamrolled by those who do. That said, there's a few ways that I can mention, kind of like specifics in our product of tools that we've built around AI that has made the life is sort of better and easier for and like guests who are attending the events, and then the actual kind of event organizers and event planners themselves, because they're very different use cases. The first one is what I mentioned at the top of the hour, which is our little AI text messenger concierge. Again, it's just via text. There's no login required. There's no app to download. And so taking away the friction and just having AI at your fingertips has been game changing, not just for the guests themselves, but even the event organizers and the event planners. So for example, at our last offsite, I texted our AI concierge and I said, hey, we're running late to dinner. Please text all 100 guests and tell them to arrive at the restaurant at 6:15, not 6 p.m. And the AI just like got into gear and texted everybody in 5 seconds. Like, do you know how long that would have taken me without that
Yeah,
tool?
yeah,
So that's one of our most widely used features now. There's kind of more narrow use cases, which I still really love, which we're building a bunch over kind of like every touch point across the customer journey. One is for surveys. So we send our clients send a ton of surveys out every week. It could be collecting guest preferences, could be like post-event surveys, could be trying to understand what people want to do during an event. And as you can imagine, especially for the larger events, when those responses come in, you could easily have over 100 responses for a single survey. And so what we've built is basically like Google Forms on steroids, like powered by AI. And we use our AI to bring in, distill out all of those individual responses, and then put together a concise summary so that you can just read through it, in a minute and understand kind of like what to do next. And you don't have to sort through every single line item of responses that have come in. There's AI contract parsing that we're doing now, which is really cool. We
oh
send a,
yeah, I bet.
we we send so many contracts out on a weekly basis. Probably now it's probably hundreds. And a single contract can be 15 pages, 20 pages of complex legalese. And so what we do is our AI looks at the contract, it parses out the most important things, pricing, dates, attrition. It can redline, things that the end customer should watch out for, and it just makes it easier. So you don't have to like send it to a lawyer to sign it. You can just our AI does it for you. In at more of like the top of the funnel, we use AI to suggest recommended vendors. So when a customer is looking for a different, different vendors to work with, could be a restaurant, could be a hotel, could be an event space. We have just like we call it AI picks, BoomPop AI picks, and it looks at your preferences as a user, what it knows so far about the event, budget, time constraints, vibe of the event, and it starts to push up to the top of the search results vendors it recommends, and then it actually writes in real time a sentence or two about why it's recommending this specific vendor. So that's really cool. And then I think the last one, and honestly, probably the kind of the biggest one, because this is foundational to everything that we do, is this tool that we call internally the magic tool. Still a working title. And you'll probably get to experience this, Josh, if you get to do another offsite with this soon. And basically what it is, it's a real-time chat. You come into our app and you just give it a high-level prompt. So you can say, hey, BoomPop AI, I want to do a fun event for my team of 25 people. We're going to celebrate a product release that we're doing. We want to go somewhere warm in January, February next year. Our budget is around 100K. Activity should be a mix of working and fun. So kind of like 50-50. What do you have for me? And so you submit that just in kind of like a plain text prompt, just like you would with ChatGPT, and our AI gets to work. And most people have probably tried to do this in some way with like ChatGPT or Claude or one of the big LLMs. And it's technically possible. Like it'll give you some results, but ours are a lot more visual. So it's like beautiful results that come from this. And our AI crunches millions of data points. So it looks at seasonality, it looks at weather, it looks at busyness of a certain city. It looks at, if there's a big conference that's happening in a given city, and it will then provide recommendations based on all of those inputs. And then essentially, like once you like a few of the vendors, it'll build an itinerary for you in real time, and then help kind of usher the process forward in actually executing on the event. So it just, the traditional way would be going into kind of like traditional GUI and like hunting and pecking the different filters, and then getting kind of manually searching. And this is just like semantic search. So you just put in a question or a prompt, and it really gets to work and starts to put together these beautiful visual proposals for you.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I'm stoked to check it out. Are you personally using AI a lot for yourself?
Every day. Yeah.
What do you
every day.
what are you doing with it? I'm always so curious how everybody's using it. I'm like obsessed.
The $20 I spend on ChatGPT Pro goes a long way. It's like the best $20 that I spend monthly. I use it as a thought partner mostly, honestly.
Yeah,
It's helping me brainstorm ideas. It's I feed in a lot of our legal contracts into it actually, and I use that kind of like as a first pass before I send it off to our very expensive lawyers.
yeah, yeah. I've started consolidating a lot of the. So I use GPT, for a bunch of stuff, but I use a tool called Lindy, and then a couple other MCPs, and then another sort of like vibe coding tool. But lately I've started to consolidate everything into one knowledge base, and I have all these automations built. So basically, every meeting that I have, every note I take, all of the documentation for my company and also personally, like literally everything is fed into this knowledge base, and then I have a bunch of categorization as well, and then I connected it to Twilio to a text, and so I have one text like number that I can. Basically, if I want to remind myself about a task, if I want to remind myself about an important date, if I want to make a note, if I want to add more context or information just for this sort of brain to know, or if I just want advice, right? I just can literally just ask anything. I plug in like Michael Mockery's coaching and all kinds of other books like Innovator's Dilemma and every book you can think of. I'm just like feeding all this thing into this knowledge base. So it's got like my personal information and up to date every meeting I have, every like note I take, and then all this sort of external. I'm sure a lot of this knowledge is also available that I can query on the internet, but then I'll like literally feed in transcripts of books and things. It just keeps getting better at helping me, not just with it like with advice, but it indexes everything. So the part of the prompt is remember everything that I ask you and add it to the context of what you know about me. And it's amazing over time what it's able to help with.
Yeah.
Now I'm working on a therapist, so I was like, why am I using another therapist? I could just literally plug in all of the, all of the different sort of approaches, whether it's cognitive behavior or things like that, and into this one sort of agent, and then start to ask it questions, and I plug in all my personal information. The same thing you would tell a therapist, and it's pretty amazing, man. Like the things that that you can do.
You built your own agent.
Yeah, there's a few of them now. I'm trying to figure out how to get one. So there's one thing that does everything, but it turns out it doesn't necessarily need to be that. You can have different agents for different things. I have like one that's just for like the real estate stuff, just like it will take every invoice and index it and add it to a file, and every time we spend time on something. What I love about as you start to like incorporate AI into anything that you're doing, and by the way, I think anybody, doesn't matter what you do, what your job is, everybody can be using it. The thing I think is cool is that it's so iterative. Like every day, something happens. Like, you know what? I'm going to update this product. I'm going to change this a little bit. And then over time, fast forward like 6, 7, 8, 9 months, you're like, oh my God, this thing is, it does. And it just takes that much time for it to continually learn. And the models start to improve, right? So like, there's so many different models. Like GPT is good for some things, and then Gemini 2.5 is good.
Yeah.
Claude just released Sonnet 4, which is pretty sick.
Yeah.
And as they get better, this thing gets better too. And it's just wild. Sometimes I get overwhelmed just thinking about like all the other things they could do,
How proactive is your agent? That's one thing that I've always been really curious about. I think like the most ideal case is that it knows everything about you. It's just this kind of like this ambient agent, and it can just ping you kind of proactively. Hey, Josh, like noticed you didn't get your steps in today. You should go for a run. Or hey, you haven't left to the airport yet. There's traffic. You need to get in the car now. Like is it nudging you?
Hold on, I'm making a note about that because that's a good one. 1 second. That tracking time watch. That's great. It is proactive. So I program a bunch of stuff. That sort of leaving for the house. I love that. I'm going to add that in. I've built a bunch of integrations to things like my orbing, things like that. But the thing that I find most helpful right now in terms of productivity is, so all my meeting notes get every video. They get recorded as a video, and also if it's a video meeting. If not, I can record it from my phone as well. But all my meeting notes get transcribed along with the video. And then it indexes every action item, every decision, every struggle or conflict. And it indexes those. And then at the end of every week, it emails me with a recap. Or actually it's on Monday. So for the next week, like, hey, here's the things that you need to follow up on. And it will follow up on some of them. Like, hey, I sent a Slack to this person, or I texted this person. Here's the things that we still haven't decided. And it will sort of send me this recap every week. And it also reminds me of any important dates. So like, hey, Blake's birthday is on Thursday. Do you want to send a text or something? The proactivity is really only as good as the prompts that I've been giving, but I bet that could get a lot better. I didn't think about that. I really like that. Right now, it's just like some sort of like weekly cadence of things that it reminds me of, and then some actions it will take, like sending messages and things like that. But could probably do a lot more.
I need to get this playbook. I would pay money for the Josh playbook on this. This is amazing.
I'll show you. Yeah. Well, I think I said to the team I was going to do like an overview. For me, like the thing that I love the most is it's sort of like what you're doing with BoomPop, where you can ask all these questions. I think what I implore everyone to do, right, is start creating a knowledge base that an AI can call and make it as specific to you as possible. So for BoomPop, right, here's everything about your event. You can ask questions. I don't know if everybody realizes how much you can actually use that for yourself with an AI, right? And you think about like every note you take, every thought you have, right? So like when I have a thought, even if it's just like I'm upset about something, or I want to remember something, or something made me feel a certain way, I tell my AI, and it's set up so like the way I set it up is it's an API call to the SMS of this this Twilio, right? So basically I'm texting this thing, and then based on the context of the text, it understands, oh, this is you wanting me to just remind you of a task. I'm going to add it to your task board, and then I'll follow up. Or this is you like letting me know there's another, like, hey, remind me that like it's Blake's birthday next week, right? Or just add this to the index of that. This is you just adding more context. This is you asking me advice. And each time, whatever I text, it will then either follow up with me, or it will just index all that information. And over time, this thing just knows so much about you personally that I don't know about you, but I forget so many things. Yeah. And, there's so much context that you have to make the right decisions. And I'm a big believer in like, how much context you have is directly correlated to like how good of a decision you can make, or what kind of decision you can make. And like a light bulb hit for me like a month ago. I was like, oh my God, there's so much stuff I have in files or in places that like I need to just feed into this thing. And then like it's gonna help me remember. Like I won't remember that thing that I did last month, and that sort of proactiveness does come up. Where like it will like often what I'll do is like, hey, based on the last two weeks of meetings I've had, what are two really important things that I'm not doing right now?
Mhm.
And it will give me more like 10. And I'm like blown away so often of like the things that it remembers. Obviously, I know why it remembers it. Like, you and this person discussed changing the design of this. And you said that if you didn't do this by this time, and it will remind me, like, oh my God, yeah. Why didn't I follow up on that?
Yeah.
Or, there was a conflict that you had in this meeting and I haven't seen any follow up. Did you and that person reconcile? If not, I recommend, and the more you feed that in, the more over time, again, it's all about how you prompt it, right? You can prompt it like, hey, make sure that you consider any conflicts that arise in meetings. And actually, this is part of the prompt that I have, like conflicts that arrive in meetings that I'm having. And if you identify, patterns over time, recommend solutions of how I can interact better with my team. So in every meeting that I have, part of the prompt is, of course, like identify any action items and who owns them, what decisions were made, key topics, things like that. And then also identify any, I have to pull up the prompt to remember all the ways in which I describe this. But basically what I tell the AI is like, tell me how I did. Like,
Mhm.
how did I respond to conversations? Was I listening well enough? Was I providing the right kind of feedback? Were they? And it gives me sort of feedback in each meeting of like the sentiment of the meeting. And over time, obviously, it gets indexed. So,
You know how to take this to the next level? We were at Auto Camp in Cape Cod a couple weeks ago for our EPD offsite, which is awesome. You're probably familiar with Auto Camp. Like, awesome,
no.
awesome. Oh, you're not? Okay. Auto Camp is, I guess it's like a hotel. I don't know if they call it. It's basically Airstream trailers, like hundreds of Airstream trailers in a cool place that usually has some kind of like rural vibe to it. It could be Yosemite, it could be the Russian River, it could be Cape Cod. They kind of pick out these amazing locations. And then they have a central lodge where you go and you can buy food and you kind of go back to your little Airstream, or you go and adventure during the day. Anyways, we were there. It was an amazing week. And our interim CFO, Young, has this necklace that he wears, which is basically a device that's always recording, records every conversation of his day. And at the end of it, he
Oh,
gets
really?
this. Yeah, there's a bunch of companies that do this now. At the end of the day, he gets this digest of what decisions were made during meetings, what are important follow ups. He's a self-described like terrible note taker, and so this is a really helpful thing for him. It's like in a way it's a little dystopian, but honestly, I think this is going to be norm. 10 years from now, I think everyone is going to have this thing. The singularity is definitely near. But if you had something like this, then it would just know everything,
Yeah.
every interaction you have during the day.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, it really is. I think I've had this conversation too many times now, but it's just wild. Every week almost, I'm just more blown away with like how little we've even scratched the surface of what can be done here. It
Hmm.
is, the more that I see them, the more I'm like, yeah, this is things have changed and they're not going back. And this
Yep.
is definitely a different world we live in. But for now, it's pretty fucking exciting. Like the things that you can build anything. Yeah, and
Totally.
what I love is that we're getting to this place where the impediment to innovation is how willing you are to think about net new ideas,
Hmm.
things to build. On
That's
any
it.
given day, you could build anything you want. You just need to have well, the idea and the willingness to actually go and do it. And it's pretty easy. And again, the more you use these things, obviously, the better you get.
Yeah.
So I'm stoked, man. I just, just personally, like for things, I use a lot of my personal life as well.
Hmm.
It's, I mean, I feel like we're just getting to we're literally just at like,
The day
mile
one.
one of the
It's day
marathon,
one.
you know?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. What's next for BoomPop? Like what's like on the horizon for you guys?
Yeah. So it's not public yet, but I think by the time this airs, it will be. We just raised a round of funding, which I know you know about. We raised just over 15 million of fresh funding, which is really exciting from some amazing investors: Wing VC, Thayer Ventures, Atomic, Acme, a bunch of well-known executives and operators at some of the world's top companies. And beyond the capital, which is really exciting, I think we wanted to bring investors who could who know this industry really well, who can open doors for us, who can open their network, who can help us see around corners. So that's what I'm really excited about, is just to have more great talent and thinkers on our side, in our corner. And, you know, in terms of what's next and what we're going to do with that funding, we're doubling down on our self-serve software platform, just to make it really easy for anybody to come in and not have to go through a human to do things. We'll always have a full service team, but their role will become more specialized over time as our software does more. And then also, we're having a lot more interest from larger enterprise customers who want to use our platform. And so we just need to build out a lot more functionality for those larger companies, better security, all the stuff an enterprise customer kind of requires. But I think, our long-term goal is to really plant our flag as the most innovative company in the events and travel space. And I think what we've built so far is really exciting, but just like we were talking about with AI, this is day one for us. We're just getting started. Long term, we want BoomPop to be the go-to platform for planning and executing any type of event. We've started and have been very focused on kind of the B2B use case, which I think is right. But our sites are much broader than that. And if any event kind of requires logistics, coordination, herding cats, we want to be the first call.
I love that. And I can attest to it makes things so easy. Again, I'm selfishly restaurant focused. How can, and I know, we've done a bunch of events where we planned like pretty incredible meals actually. How can restaurants and other event spaces work with BoomPop? Like what's like the process?
Super easy. Go to our website, boompop.com. In the top right corner, I think there's a link to connect with us, like a partnerships link. And you can just put in your contact information and our team will reach out. But yeah, we are always, by the way, looking for amazing new partners, restaurants, activity providers, hotels. So yeah, would love to connect with any and all folks who are interested in working with us and taking in more kind of group event business.
Sweet. Well, Blake, this was awesome. I'm glad we got to catch up. We don't get to catch up that much, so we get to do it on a podcast.
I know. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
I appreciate it, man. And hopefully the next time we'll actually do it, face to face in
Let's do it. Yeah,
California. All right, brother.